Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Classes of Mail. My name is Alan Gigax, and I am here with Eric Ellis. He is here to talk about some political issues that are ripped from today's headlines. In fact, that's the issue, is that there's political stuff going on right now that you guys need to know about. So first, hello Eric, welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. No, it was a pleasure talking to you in Boston. That was really cool.
And that was cool. Yeah, that was where the podcast really reached a new level because I was able to interview so many great people like you and get, access to good information for the podcast and reach new audiences. And it's worked out so well. And so it's great to have a resource like you to bring back on to the podcast to talk about important legislative things that are going on. So let's get right. Well, first, that episode was like 50 episodes ago. So let's reintroduce you. Tell people like what branch you're from and what your role is in the NALC.
Okay, so I started with the post office in 1992 in Monterey, which for those listeners who aren't familiar with California, that's on the coast between San Francisco and Los Angeles. So I started there in 1992 as a casual.
Is that where that bonsai tree is? That's like famous tree out on the coast?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay.
So started there in 1992, and then I transferred to Pacific Grove, which is the next city over, in 1994. And I transferred to Fresno at the end of 2000. So yes, so I have just over 33 years in the post office.
It's a good stretch.
Role I play in the
All right, you guys probably noticed that we had a little connectivity issue there, and I think we have it squared away, so we're going to pick back up with Eric. Where you left off was at Fresno, and now the computer doesn't like the Fresno any better than anybody else does. So, all right, so we'll pick up at Fresno. What happened when you moved to Fresno?
Okay, well, one thing is we had 3 kids.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one thing we had. But anyways, I do wear a lot of hats in the union at the post office. One thing that I do is I do teach academy class, which I know you're familiar with.
Right.
And so I actually deal with both extremes. So I teach the academy class one minute, and then the next minute, I also do the retirement classes on a regional level. So I go from the brand new to the older set.
Yeah, right. From the cradle to the grave as far as postal career is concerned.
Exactly. And I still serve as a shop steward, and I am my branch's legislative officer, and I also serve as a state district officer.
Goodness. Do you ever have time to actually carry your route?
There's only 2 academy instructors in my area. So I probably would guesstimate that I see my route maybe a third of the time now.
Okay. Yeah. Well, if there's a CCA who's opted on your route, I guess that works out well for them. So that's something. You spread that work around, give somebody else that stability, and that's cool. So yeah, man, color me jealous with you doing all this Carrier Academy stuff, and it makes the job so interesting. People don't think about the other opportunities there are in the Postal Service or within the union to do things besides putting mail in the box that are still really important.
Well, yeah, and when I teach the academy class, I let the people there know that there's a lot of opportunities within the post office that people aren't aware of.
Right.
And one of the things that I do talk about is union participation. At the East Fresno station where I teach the academy class, there's a vacant office where for a year and a half we had somebody involved in TRAP.
Okay.
And he was there for a year and a half, Monday through Friday, 7 to 3 o'clock in an air-conditioned office. I tell people, hey, look, if you want to be involved in that sort of thing, here's the secret. Show up to meetings. When they ask for volunteers, raise your hand.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, that is absolutely right. There is a lot of opportunity that presents itself just at the union meeting, just from showing up. Yeah, that's a very good call. Okay, so let's now talk about what we actually need to get to, which is current active legislation that potentially is going to have a big impact on letter carriers who are thinking about retiring. So tell people what's going on in Congress.
Okay, so this just was announced last Friday, and so it's just like fresh off the press. I do want to get
Oh, hold on.
those of you who are
I'm losing
students.
you again. Let's try. Can you turn off your video?
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah. All right. Listeners,
Okay.
bear with us for a sec. Okay. Yeah, there we
Okay.
go. Yep.
Okay. You can hear me good now?
Yeah, that is better. Nice. Okay.
Okay. All right. So I want to point out to the listeners, Article 43 of the National Agreement. What does that have to do with politics? Well, in Article 43, it states, should any part of this agreement or any provision contained herein be rendered or declared invalid by reason of any existing or subsequently enacted legislation or by a court of competent jurisdiction, such invalidation of such part of or provision of this agreement shall not invalidate the remaining portions of this agreement, and they shall remain in full force and effect.
There you go. A
Now,
severability clause.
yeah, but
Yep.
and so you might think, well, wait a minute, what does that have to do with that? I mean, in layman's terms, Congress or the courts can invalidate any part of this agreement,
Sure.
with a stroke of a pen or by a court ruling. And now you might think, well, wait a minute, what the courts? Well, we got a Supreme Court now that's not very favorable to union or to labor interests.
Right.
I think it goes without saying. And, the courts have been tested lately in regards to, is it possible to declare not invalid, but is it possible to just wipe a union away?
Right.
Issue an executive order, for instance, and then test it via the courts.
Yeah,
well, it's happening all the time.
Right. District courts
And-
have done okay for us, but yeah, the Supreme Court, like, I'm not ready to put my faith in the court to come to our rescue at this point.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why it does mention that. So it's something that, like former Justice William Brennan once said, 5 votes here can do anything.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
That's
right.
There you go.
Yep.
Okay. Now, with that as a backdrop, okay, so keep in mind, anything that we have, whether it's contractual, whether it's our benefits, pay, anything can be done away with the stroke of a pen. Now, with that said, it was announced on Friday by James Comer, who is the chairman of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, that they're going to have a markup on Wednesday, April 30th. Now, what that means in layman's terms is that when they mark up a bill, okay, they announce it, the committee debates it, okay, what's in the bill, oral legislation, and then they vote on it. And once it's voted out of committee, then it goes to the floor. Okay. Now, this, what I'm about to discuss is part of reconciliation.
Okay.
What's
so
reconciliation?
is this where it's already been passed in the House, it's passed in the Senate, but they don't match? And so they have to make them match. Okay.
They have to make them match. Okay. So the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, which has jurisdiction over the Postal Service, has been tasked with finding $50 billion in cuts. Okay.
Okay.
There's only one place where those cuts can come from. Us, as federal and postal employees. Okay.
I feel bad for my supervisors who might have, no, go ahead. Yeah, obviously we're the big expense.
They're all in this,
right.
Their benefits have to be cut as well. So, if they want to write their, or if they want to write or email or call their congressman, they're more than free to do so.
Right.
Okay.
And when we did like those Fight Like Hell rallies, at least in my area, we made it a point that, hey, supervisors, you're in on this too. We're all fighting the same fight together.
Yes. That's correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, because their retirement benefits under this legislation would be cut the same as ours, so they have a dog in this fight as well.
Yeah, so let's get into it. What is on the line with this legislation? Okay,
let's go to Reconciliation Title 9 under the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, Section 90001, raise FERS employee contribution requirements. Okay, this is what it states, and I'll go ahead and read the language. Raises the FERS retirement contribution rate for many existing federal civilian employees and postal employees up to the new rate of 4.4% of their salary. Okay, now to explain, for those federal and postal employees who were hired as career employees after 2012, they already have to pay a higher rate.
Right.
If you were hired after 2013, you have to pay 4.4% of your base salary toward your pension.
As if
For
the
those of
table
us who
two
are hired
carriers
prior,
didn't have enough stacked against them.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So this is for you and me who were hired prior to 2013 as career employees. So we're
Okay.
paying 0.8%. So just to use simple math, let's just say we're paying $20 a pay period toward our pension. It's a little bit more, but let's just make the math simple.
Yeah.
So should this pass, instead of paying $20 per pay period, we'd be paying roughly $110 per pay period. So that would be roughly $90 a pay period, a pay cut.
Right.
So
it's
that's roughly
six times larger contribution, roughly.
Yeah. Well, I think it's 5.5 from 0.8 to 4.4%.
Oh, yeah, it'd be 5.5.
So
Yeah, 5.5. Yep.
So 5.5 times. So basically, you're talking about a roughly $2,400 a year pay cut.
Wow.
For us older folks.
Right. And there's no change in the benefit, right? We're just paying more for the same benefit.
Well, hold that thought,
Oh,
because
no.
that's not true. Actually, it's paying more for less benefit.
Perfect. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say.
Okay. Yeah, I know, huh? All right. So that's one thing. Now, some people might think, well, you know what? Like, because I've seen on social media, Facebook, formats like that table two carriers are saying things like this. Well, hey, welcome to table two. Now you guys got to pay the same thing we are. Or, hey, it's only fair, right, that you guys. And they're also saying things like this. Well, yeah, we need to shore up Social Security. We need to shore up our debt, or decrease our deficit level.
Sure.
This has nothing to do with that. All this has to do, if you read House Concurrent Resolution 14, which is a reconciliation package, you're going to find recurrent references to a $4.5 trillion tax cut for the wealthy. What's paying for that? Are these benefit cuts to federal and postal employees, which we are? Okay, so having said that, okay, let's go to section 90002.
The other good part, yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, elimination of the FERS annuity supplement. Okay. Now, this is also called a special annuity supplement. Some people call it the Social Security supplement. That's not a proper term, because this supplement is not paid through Social Security. It's paid through the Office of Personnel Management, or OPM. Okay.
So first, explain what the supplement is, so that people know, like, what's the system now, or what are they getting in this supplement?
Okay. So I'm going to read to you off of my own annuity estimate. So I'm eligible to retire in 1 year. Okay. So here's how it works. Now, I'm eligible to retire when I'm 56 years and 10 months old. People go, wait a minute, how did you come to that? I was born in 1969. So under the legislation that creates, you don't retire at 55 and 30 like the old civil service retirement employees did. We're under FERS. It's a brand new system. So if you're born in 1969, such as, myself, well, then I'm eligible to retire at 56 and 10. If you're born after 1969, your minimum retirement age is 57. Okay. So at that point, there's two parts that I would get between that age and age 62. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and make the math simple. Let's just say age 57. Okay. So let's just say, so for a period of 60 months between 57 and 62, I get a pension and I get the annuity supplement. The pension is going to be roughly $2,300 a month. Okay. Now,
so this is something that a lot of people are curious about. So if you retire, then the amount, because we all retire, presume we retire at top step, our annuity after we retire, or our pension, is all going to be relatively equal. So that pension is $2,300 a month. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, because we're talking about, let's see, roughly 34 and change years of service.
Okay.
Yes, and so that figure represents that before anything is taken out. Now that 2,300 does not change from 57 to 62, because we do not receive cost of living adjustments under 62.
Okay.
For FERS employees, unless you retire under disability, but that's for a separate conversation.
Sure.
Okay. So under normal circumstances, I'm going to get $2,300 for my pension for those 5 years. The other part is the annuity supplement. Okay. Now the annuity supplement, the way they calculate that is they divide your years of service. Now, military service does not count as part of that. It counts toward retirement, but does not count toward the annuity supplement. Okay. For those of you who are veterans. Okay. So they divide the number of years by 40, and then you multiply that by your Social Security benefit at age 62. Okay, so in my case, starting next year, I would receive a supplement of $1,700 a month until I reach 62. So let's just, to make the math easy, let's just say 60 months.
Okay. Yeah.
5
years. 5 years. Yep.
Okay. So now, the next section.
Okay, and you say
section
this supplement is paid for by OPM, by the Office of Personnel Management?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay,
Not by
gotcha.
Social Security.
Okay, so this
Okay.
is like a retirement perk essentially for federal workers. That if you
Under
reach under
FERS.
FERS, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Okay. So section 90002 of reconciliation title.
And I'm sorry,
9.
just one more thing, because I want to make sure the listeners understand. That's the current system prior to this legislation. What
That
you
is
just
that's the
explained.
system we are under right now.
Okay, so now
Okay,
tell us
before it
what.
changes.
Yes, now tell us what may be
What the
coming.
proposed reform is, and to make the listeners clear, when we say the word reform, it does not mean add on to. It means take away. Okay.
Yeah, for sure. In this case, yeah.
Okay. So, section 90002, elimination of the FERS annuity supplement for new federal retirees. This reform, okay, again, that term reform
Sure.
eliminates the additional retirement annuity payment that those eligible to retire before the age of 62 currently receive until they reach the age of Social Security retirement eligibility benefits. Okay.
Oh boy.
So basically what it says here is that if this goes into effect and if I retire next year, I lose that $1,700 a month. Now, if you multiply 1,700 times 60, that's $102,000 that I would lose.
Wow.
Or that any retiree would lose if they were eligible under the same circumstances. So that's $102,000 that's taken out of your pocket and my pocket to pay for a tax cut for the wealthy. Okay, let's just call it as it is.
Yeah, that's
Okay?
another luxury car that wealthy person gets to have so that you can work another 5 years. What a trade-off.
And the funny thing is that there was I was reading the original proposal, and the way it worded it was they saying, oh, this reform enables federal postal employees to it enables them to extend their careers. What nice wording, right? It enables them to extend them. I would force them to extend their careers, because you take away $1,700 a month. Hey, that's $102,000 total. That's real money there.
Yeah, rather than enabling us to extend our careers, it forces us to extend our careers. Essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. And it doesn't end there. Okay. Here's another one. Section 9003, high five average for calculating CSRS and FERS pension. Okay.
Right. Instead of high 3. Yeah.
Total pension benefit by spending by basing a retiree's annuity payment on their highest average 5 earning years instead of the highest 3.
Right.
Okay. So in this case, as of right now, the high 3, they're talking about the last 36 months in service.
Yeah, generally, yeah.
This quote, we're the 60 months of service. So given that we get raises and COLAs every year,
right.
Okay.
Each year you go back, that pay is going to go down.
Exactly. Now, let's go over just for a minute here what the quote unquote savings are. Now, for raising the contribution requirements for the pre-2013 hires, that would result in a savings, according to their estimate, of $30.716 billion.
Wow.
To go to eliminate the annuity supplement, that would be $10.113 billion in savings. And then go to a high 5, that's $4.750 billion in savings. Now, there's another section here, 90004, election for at-will employment and lower FERS contributions for new federal civil service hires. Now, to my understanding, this does not apply to us. Someone may correct me on this, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't apply to us. But
because the contract supersedes it, I would imagine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this says gives new federal employee hires the option to elect to serve at will in exchange for higher take-home pay. Okay, now this is be a 4.541 billion, and that's it. Now, now I'm sure your listeners know what at will means, right? We fired it for any
You can
reason.
be fired. Yeah. Yeah. And that, I mean, it still has to be a legal reason. They can't fire you for discrimination or whatever. But yeah, they can get rid of you. Yeah. And you don't have those same protections.
Okay. So between those four reforms, you get to, they get to, let's see, you're 30 plus, okay, you're getting to 50 billion in savings, which is what they're looking for. So yes, this is very real, folks, because one thing that when it comes to normal legislation, there's a threshold in the Senate where you have to get to 60 votes to get to a vote. That's called the filibuster.
Right, right.
Okay. This House Concurrent Resolution 14 is not subject to the filibuster.
No, because it's already passed in both houses, in the House and the Senate.
A simple majority vote. Okay,
wow.
in both the House and Senate.
Right.
So this is scary, folks. I mean, and here's the thing. I want to go back to a point that I raised earlier about, well, some of the newer hires are raising the point, well, isn't it fair for everybody to contribute the same? Well, I mean, I know there's some merit in saying that. Yes, that's true. But those other those other changes that they plan on making, they affect everybody.
Right.
Okay. It's not just the older folks like you and I. That's everybody. And so if you started, let's say at age 27 as a career employee and you're planning to retire at 57, well, you might have to alter your plans because now if they take away the supplement,
right,
might have to be working till 52. That's 5 years more that you have to work. I mean, I can tell you just myself, I mean, 33 years of doing this job. I mean, I'm not like Usain Bolt on the street anymore.
Right.
I'm,
as I'm getting older, I'm finding that even though I'm better at the job, I know the ways to do it without killing myself. The years of this job from like 50 to 55 are way harder on my body than it was from 30 to 35. So adding those years at the end, that's rough.
Yeah. So and so this is something that I know it hasn't gotten a lot of, and I'm surprised that more hasn't been raised on this. I know it's just Friday, but I know that for a lot of your listeners, and I know I'll even include myself to some degree, with the contract situation as the situations exist, I know there's a lot of attention as to, what's going on with our union leadership in Washington, D.C.
Right.
For instance, our the national elections in the NALC in 2026. And I know that's, on a lot of people's minds. And I want to kind of, on another one proposal that's been raised is, hey, look, I mean, when we begin our contract negotiations, hey, 2.1% plus COLAs. If you don't agree to that, hey, arbitration. Let's go, right?
Yeah.
But here you have a proposed pay cut of 3.8% of our base pay.
Right.
Okay.
And it's totally outside of the contractual process.
Exactly. And so it goes back to Article 43 of the National Agreement. I mean,
wow.
And one thing, but here's another thing too, that I got into it with a major, let's say, presidential candidate for the NALC. On one Facebook post, we were talking about, well, has Article 43 ever been invoked? And actually, it has. If you go back to the 2006 postal reform law that was, of course, enacted, and it, caused us a lot of grief because we had to prepay, future retiree benefits 8 years in advance.
Yeah.
And basically bankrupt us. But part of that bill that part of that law that was forgotten was that if you're injured on the job, there's a waiting period before you can go on COP. If let's say that, and that's 3 days where if the injury is 14 calendar days or less, you have to use your own leave for those 3 days. Okay. Now, I would argue that's in the ELM. That's ELM 545.83. Okay. That's part of our contract.
Article 19. Article 19, right.
Yeah, exactly. So for someone to say that our contract has never been altered by legislation, well, they're wrong. Right. Okay. It's been altered more times than people think. Sure. And so in this case, you're talking about our pay and benefits that, when you were hired on in the post office, whether, and some people got their start as a, maybe as an employee in another federal agency. You were hired with the expectation that you were going to retire with a certain level of benefits that you were going to
Absolutely.
pay a certain amount into your pension. And now you're getting into a situation where Congress is saying, well, you know what? Yeah, we hired you under these circumstances. Well, guess what? What Congress giveth, Congress can take away, and they're taking away.
Right.
And so that's the scary part. And don't think that it couldn't end there. And I'm going to give you another proposal, not in this legislation, but this has been written down.
Okay.
The elimination of cost of living adjustments for retirees. Okay.
Oh,
Now,
sure, because their cost of living never changes. They're immune to
exactly.
price fluctuation.
Yeah. And
Right.
here's the thing is that a lot of people don't understand why cost of living adjustments or COLAs are important. Well, let's do a scenario. Let's say that you retire and let's say your pension is $2,500 a month.
Sure.
Okay. Let's say you retire when you're 58, 59, something like that. Well, if they take away the COLA, you'll say your pension is, $2,500 a month. Well, 30 years from then, what's your COLA going to be?
$2,500 a month.
$2,500 a month, right? And
Right.
I would probably venture to say that $2,500 a month 30 years from now would probably purchase a tenth of what what it could at the point you retired. So but these are proposals in the mill that we have to be attentive to those, because yes, rightly so, that we've paid a lot of attention to what's in the current contract, meaning that
Right.
of course we have to keep our raises, we have to keep our COLAs, and could we have done better in the last contract? I totally agree with people who've been on your podcast that opine, yes, of course. But then on the flip side, you have characters in Congress who love, to cut our wages and benefits.
No doubt.
Another proposal that, didn't make it to the final cut, evidently, was changing the percentage we pay for our health benefits from let's say 72 to 75%, which is what we pay now, to a flat amount. That's
and
again,
interesting.
Yeah, and that's something that we talk about, how the amount that your pay can be altered by.
Right.
I mean, so these are just, proposal after proposal after proposal is being made now that they're not to our benefit. And so we have to keep close watch on that. And, just as much as we care about having a fair contract, basically that as much as we pay attention to the contractual side of our job, we also have to pay attention to the legislative side, because anything that we're given as part of a contract can be taken away very easily.
Okay, Eric, so let me ask you, what can my listeners do? What should they be doing to help protect against these sorts of things happening?
Okay, now one thing is, of course, I'm going to assume that in the upcoming days, you're going to get some more information on this on the NALC website.
Okay.
I know that there's some parts of this that, okay, it's going to be marked up in committee. And, if I had to guess, given the makeup of that committee, it's probably going to pass through committee. Okay. That's, I can't do much about that. It's probably going to do so on a party line vote. But it's not done there, because it has to go, of course, to the full House, and the House and the Senate have to agree on exact language. So we will have opportunities to contact our House member or senator on this proposal. And so we're looking, for, on the NALC.org website, I'm positive that we probably will get direction as to, calling our congressperson or senator with exact language. A lot of times on the legislative portal, it'll give you exact language, to send a letter, or, like via email, or to call, and they'll give you a certain number to call on a switchboard, and they'll direct you to your congressperson.
We had that National Day of Action when there was the open threat to dismantle the Postal Service completely. And so that was put out by the NALC. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to assume that that's probably going to be happening. It just hasn't happened yet, so I can't really speak for national on this one, because again, that's up to them to post this. But I know one thing that I would do, and I'm speaking off the cuff here, but if you have family and friends in red states, when I say red states, I'm meaning states in which the senators, the congresspeople are mainly Republican. I would very definitely be calling them and letting them know, hey, look, I mean, I was planning on retiring, and my pension, I've worked so many years, and, this is something that I've earned. One thing I'll also note is, if you're a veteran, I would make sure I would mention that as well. Because many
Sure.
of these congresspeople and senators, they pride themselves on being pro-veteran, the Postal Service being the largest employer of veterans outside the DoD and the largest employer of disabled veterans outside the Department of Defense. Congresspeople and senators tend to listen when you bring that up. So I would not be shy if you're a veteran of the armed forces about mentioning that in that conversation.
Right on. Okay, so let's briefly. Go ahead.
Oh, and I was also going to mention the letter carrier political fund.
There we go. Yes.
Okay. All right. So I want to, of course, one of the things that I was reminded of this afternoon before I went, before we talked, was reading the disclaimer. Okay. So I'll go ahead and briefly read that.
All right.
By making a contribution to the letter carrier political fund, you're so voluntarily with the understanding that your contribution is not a condition of membership in the NALC or of employment in the USPS, nor is it a part of union dues. You have a right to refuse to contribute without any reprisal. Any guideline amounts are merely suggestions, and you may contribute more or less than the guidelines suggest. The union will not favor or disadvantage you by reason of the amount of your contribution or your decision not to contribute. Okay, so cool. The LCPF is used for candidates and for political activities undertaken, as permitted by law. Okay.
Right.
So, yes. Okay. So that's a disclaimer. I want to make sure that we read that. So, cool. To conform to law. Okay. So one thing that we need to really concentrate on going forward is that, hey, I've been contributing to letter carrier political fund for 20 years, so I'm not asking something that I'm not doing myself.
Right. I also contribute to letter carrier political fund.
Yes, and I know many of your listeners do. And so one thing that if you're not contributing, if you go on the NALC site, if you look up letter carrier political fund, there are directions as to how to contribute by payroll deduction. I know in the past, we've asked for, let's say, $5 per pay period. I just say whatever you can give. And I would also say that for those of you who are already giving, if you can up your contribution by $1 or $2 per pay period, hey, that'd be helpful.
Everything helps. You just got this raise. Everybody saw like $1.50 to $2.50 raise, whatever we just got. So if you can spare another just $5 a check, it really helps. Everything helps.
Yes. And one thing to keep in mind, union dues cannot be used for political purposes. So that's why the letter carrier political fund is separate. And we use that to help our friends get elected to Congress, whether it be Democrat or Republican. I want to emphasize to your listeners that a lot of people think, well, yeah, you guys just endorse Democrats or just give. That's not true. I can tell you personally, David Valadeo, who is the lead co-sponsor on HR 1522, which would allow CCAs, casualties to get their time back. He's one of our friends, and he happens to be a Republican, a good friend of ours.
Nice.
And we give him the maximum, 10,000, an election cycle. And I know that one of the hats I forgot to mention earlier is that I sit on the executive board of our Central Labor Council, and I've taken a lot of grief over the years from other unions saying, well, hey, why do you guys endorse Republicans? My response is we help those who help us, meaning that we look out for letter carriers. And if we have a Republican who votes on our behalf, who stands with us on the important issues, we will support that politician, regardless of political party. So we have to be consistent in that.
Right. So another thing I'd like to point out with the letter carrier political fund is if you're newly donating or if you're upping your donation, they give out the best swag. The shirts, like the breathable tech material shirts, they're really good shirts. And the drinking vessels, oh my God. The Eric, is my camera still on for you? Can you see me?
Yes.
You see I have my can cozy. That's this double wall steel insulated. And oh my God, it is by far the best can cozy I have. And then I have that same like double wall. What's up?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And then I have the double wall steel mug that's like a 16-ounce mug.
Yeah.
Yeah. And dude, that is my number one drinking vessel. I mean, it's really good stuff. So another reason to donate. Even if you don't care about your pension, dude, get a good mug. Yeah. All right. So there's one more thing I want to talk to you about before we get out of here. Just reiterate one last time, the letter carrier political fund, please donate. Now, with retirement, you are a retirement specialist. You were part of a retirement seminar here at my branch, 2502 in Las Vegas. And in addition to you coming to people's branches to talk about retirement, people also get solicitations to talk about retirement. And we're going to help you plan your retirement fund. And sometimes you'll even get these mailed to you at the post office. What's up with those, Eric?
Okay. Well, I was reviewing Elm section 667.331.
I know
Use
the
of
one.
USPS property for private gain is prohibited. They're right there in black and white. So here's the thing: is that especially when you have people nearing retirement, you're going to get solicitations from people trying to get you into single life annuities, things like that, or they want you to transfer your funds in your thrift savings plan to one of their private funds. One of the things about the thrift savings plan, a lot of people don't realize, is that the cost of maintaining your retirement, the TSP, is the lowest of any fund out there. So it's better for you to just keep it in there. Now, I would say if you do happen, you're just saying, okay, you know what, there's a company out there, they are strong on their fiduciary responsibilities. Okay. I mean, I would try to talk you out of it perhaps, but if you know a company that they're, highly rated, they take care of their customer. Basically their job is to look out for the customer first. Well, then that's one thing. But a lot of companies out there, they want you to transfer the money over into a single life annuity. And basically the way that works is that, let's say your portfolio, they promise you, okay, 13% a year is what you'd be getting. And then let's say there's 1 year your portfolio does great, makes 30%. Well, guess what? They're going to pocket the 17% that because they're promising you 13%. So if your portfolio made 30%, well, guess who's getting the 17%
right,
extra?
Of course, they keep anything surplus.
And so they're in it for themselves. And so they're not supposed to, these private salespeople, not only do they sometimes try to show up to union meetings, but they also try to show up on the workroom floor.
Yes, we had one at my station a couple months ago.
Yeah, and so that is prohibited according to the Elm. So they are supposed to be escorted off the premises by postal inspectors. If that should happen, feel free to call the postal inspectors and have them escorted off.
When these people come to your meetings or they come to your station or just send you solicitations through the mail, they make it look like, oh, I'm with your union or I'm with the Postal Service. And they're not. They're just salespeople trying to take commissions off of your retirement.
That's correct. Yes. Yep. And so I know when we do retirement seminars, that's something that we mention, that because a lot of people, and you see this on social media all the time, that they're transferring their TSP, they're transferring the money, to some private, private company, and you try to talk them out of it because it's like, again, they're promised a certain base amount that they're going to be getting a year, and and they're allured to that because and a lot of times it's out of fear. I mean, especially now you've seen these fluctuations in the stock market, and people are thinking, wow, if I can get into something that 15% sure thing, well, why not? Right? Sounds like a good deal, but a lot of times, hey, you could do better if you just parked in the TSP and just let it grow. But of course, people are adults; they can make their own decisions. But if it could be avoided by not putting these people in front of them where they shouldn't be there anyway, well, that's so much the better.
Right. Yeah, exactly. All right. So look out for those. And for goodness sakes, donate to your thrift savings plan. And just like we did when the Postal Service itself was threatened, reach out to your congressperson, your senator, your various representatives, and try to stand up for yourself, stand up for your job, stand up for your retirement. These are things that you've earned and that you were promised when you came in, that, hey, this is what your future is going to look like as a federal worker. And now that's being threatened. Yep. Okay. So Eric, anything else you want to throw in before we get out of here?
Well, yeah.
Go for it.
This is just, I know, like, over the years, like what, I know in the Postal Record, of course, we write articles. I write the California articles. So this is something that, I've talked about a lot over the years. Basically, these threats are nothing new, but, we're in a situation now where, hey, despite whatever's going on with the NELC on a national level, I know that, a lot of your listeners, they have opinions on, our national leaders, some of them, but even with that, on this issue of having our retirement benefits taken away from us, we all got to be on the same page, because whether you're for the present administration or against the administration, whether you're Democrat or Republican, hey, whatever, it affects our wallets equally.
Yes.
So, your wallet doesn't
We're
have
all
an R or a D
pro-retirement.
on. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Your wallet doesn't say D for Democrat or R for Republican or I for independent. It affects us equally. So please, if you're asked by our national to get involved by making a phone call, by sending, an email through the portal, or, if we do have rallies on the subject, whatever they ask us to do, let's be as one here.
Absolutely.
We will have, of course, I know as you pointed out in your podcast and on others that, regarding the other issues that are happening in our union, those things will take care of themselves, of course, next year. And but this is something that's kind of an immediate concern, like right now.
Right. So Eric makes this great point that the issues that we're having with President Renfro, I know Eric has been a little more circumspect about it, but I'll say it. The issues we had with our contract, the issues we had with President Renfro, and then the issues that we had with potentially dismantling the entire Postal Service, this stuff is taking all the air out of the room. And now the issue of potentially having a special convention, which was a guest on my podcast like 2 episodes ago, all this stuff is taking up so much of our attention, and really important issues can wind up falling through the cracks. And so I'm so glad you called me earlier today, Eric, and this is incredibly important. And just thank you so much for coming on to Classes Mail to talk about it.
Oh, no, it's a pleasure. I hope to be on soon again. Well, hopefully not on the same issue.
Yeah, right.
Maybe one of these days we could talk about me teaching the academy, and
I would love that.
Like that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and for that matter, because I know now that you do these retirement seminars, there's a million questions about retirement, and I'd love to have you on to talk about that too. So,
I'd love to be on. Yeah. So we'll set it up. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on. For Eric Ellis, I am Alan Gigax. Thank you guys for listening, and we will catch you next time.